The mining colony on Ravlon 7 had never been an exciting place. It was quiet, isolated, and far from any trade routes. Most people who lived there came because they needed steady work, not adventure. Life was simple: long shifts, dusty air, and evenings spent in the old dining hall that always smelled like reheated food. The colony was surrounded by wide, empty plains of dark stone, and the sky carried a pale blue glow that never truly became night. The leader of the colony, a man named Darren, had worked in mining all his life. He was not a hero or a scientist. He had calluses on his hands, wrinkles around his eyes, and a habit of rubbing his forehead whenever he felt stressed. He cared about the workers like they were his own family. Every decision he made was simple: keep everyone safe, keep the equipment running, and make sure the supply ships found something worth carrying home. For almost a year, everything had gone smoothly. Ravlon 7 was known for its mineral-rich ground, and the company back home never stopped thanking the colony for its hard work. The workers joked that the ground on Ravlon 7 must be made of metal instead of dirt. Drills ran day and night, and every week big containers filled with ore were loaded onto ships headed back toward civilized space. But about 2 months before the trouble started, strange things began to happen. At first, no one took them seriously. A few tools went missing from the storage room. A monitoring drone stopped returning data. A worker swore he saw something moving at the far edge of the quarry, but when others looked, they saw nothing. Little things. Nothing big enough to stop work. Then the tremors began. The first tremor rattled the dining hall during the evening meal. Plates jumped, water spilled, and everyone looked around in confusion. One worker laughed and said the planet must be stretching after a long nap. Most people joined in the laughter, but Darren didn't. He felt something uneasy settle in his chest. Ravlon 7 had been checked many times. It was stable, solid, and old. There were no fault lines or underground rivers. So the tremor didn't make sense. The second tremor came 3 days later. It was stronger and lasted longer. This time, a shelf full of equipment toppled in the workshop, and a storage door jammed as if the frame had bent. When Darren checked the ground sensors, they showed nothing unusual. That was the part that bothered him most. The tremors were real. Everyone felt them. Yet the sensors picked up nothing. As days passed, more workers began reporting strange things. They heard faint sounds under the ground, like distant metal scraping against stone. They felt vibrations while working near the deepest drilling site. One worker claimed he saw a thin crack in the ground pulse, like something was moving beneath it. No one believed him, but the story spread. And people grew more nervous. Then the disappearances started. The first person to go missing was a young technician named Laren. He had been assigned to check a malfunctioning drone near the eastern ridge. He left after breakfast with a kit and a locator beacon. But when the shift ended, he never returned. Everyone searched for him. They checked every corner of the ridge, every ditch, every rock. They found his kit lying on the ground, but nothing else. No sign of a struggle. No tracks. Nothing. Darren filed an official report and ordered everyone to stay in pairs during field work. But the worry in his eyes grew deeper each day. 2 days later, another worker didn't show up for the morning shift. This time, the man's communicator was found on the ground outside the equipment shed, still turned on. The mysterious tremors returned that same afternoon, stronger than ever. People began refusing to work near the deep drilling sites. They whispered to each other during meals. They told stories that made the air thick with fear. Darren finally called an emergency meeting. He stood in the middle of the dining hall while everyone sat quietly at the tables. The room was filled with a low hum of machines and worried breathing. He didn't try to hide the truth. He said they had no answers yet. He said they would double security, restrict access to the deeper tunnels, and begin scanning the area with every tool they had. But he also promised he wouldn't let the company ignore their situation. They needed support or evacuation. Something was wrong on Revlon 7, and it was growing worse. Everyone nodded, trusting him. But the trust only eased the fear a little. Late that night, after everyone else had gone to their rooms, Darren sat alone in the control center. The lights were dim, and only a single screen glowed brightly in front of him. He replayed hours of ground sensor data, video feeds, and drone maps. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Like the planet was hiding something. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead again. For the first time since he arrived, he felt powerless. He knew the colony couldn't wait anymore. He needed to send a distress signal, not the standard kind they sent when supply containers were delayed or equipment failed. This one had to be stronger, clearer, and impossible to ignore. He switched to the high-frequency transmitter, a device powerful enough to send signals across distant sectors. The guidelines said should only be used in situations where lives were at risk. Well, lives were at risk. More than he could explain. He opened a blank transmission. The cursor blinked on the screen, and he hesitated. What was he supposed to say? That the ground was rumbling? That 2 people had vanished without a trace? That something under the colony felt alive? It sounded impossible, even to him. But he had to try. He began typing slowly, choosing each word with care. He described the tremors, the disappearances, the strange noises, and the growing fear among the workers. He didn't make it dramatic. He wrote it simply, honestly, exactly as he experienced it. At the end, he added one final line. We are not alone here. And whatever is beneath us is waking up. He read the message twice, took a deep breath, and pressed send. A soft hum filled the room as the transmitter activated. A thin beam of encoded data shot into the sky, vanishing into the strange, pale blue night above Revlon 7. The transmission would bounce from relay to relay, traveling farther and farther from the colony. Even Darren didn't know how far it might reach. He leaned back, exhausted, but something inside him felt lighter. At least he had taken action. He had tried. Outside the control center, the colony slept uneasily. The air felt heavy, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. The faint glow of the sky flickered for a moment, then returned to normal. Only a few night shift workers walked between buildings, their footsteps echoing in the quiet dot in the distance. Near the deepest drilling site, a low rumble rolled across the ground, so soft that no one heard it. The ground trembled just enough to shift a few stones, then settled again. The distress signal continued traveling through space, passing stars, empty voids, and distant clusters. It traveled faster and farther than any message from Revlon 7 had ever gone. And somewhere in the vastness, in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, something detected it. But the colony didn't know that yet. All they knew was that they were waiting. Waiting for help. Waiting for answers. Waiting for the next tremor. Darren returned to his small room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the floor for a long time. He wondered if anyone would even see the message. He wondered if he had waited too long. He wondered what was happening beneath their feet. He didn't know that his message would become the turning point for more than just the colony. He didn't know it would soon shake the entire galaxy. Far away from Revlon 7, in a quiet part of the galaxy, the distress signal traveled silently through space. It passed stars, dust clouds, and empty expanses that had seen nothing alive for thousands of years. No human had ever been close to this region, and most maps considered it unexplored or even forgotten. Yet even in this emptiness, the signal was noticed. It first reached a long-abandoned probe. The probe had been built centuries ago by a civilization that had disappeared, leaving its machines behind in orbit around a small, dying star. It had floated in silence, drifting without purpose, until the faint tremor of Ravelon 7's call awakened it. Its sensors flickered to life, and the old circuits processed the strange signal. The probe had no emotions. It had no understanding of humans, their lives, or their fears. And yet, in the logic of its programming, it recognized urgency. The signal contained a frequency that indicated danger. Its internal systems triggered an automatic response. The message had to be forwarded. The probe began its journey to the nearest relay station, a massive structure orbiting a gas giant hundreds of light years away. The relay had been inactive for centuries, but the signal activated it. Lights blinked faintly across its surface as machinery long dormant roared back to life. Massive arms began to move, sensors rotated, and a small glowing panel on the central console indicated that the message had been received. Inside the relay, the signal was amplified and sent deeper into the galaxy. Each relay, each automated system, transmitted the data further and further until it reached something truly remarkable. Hidden within the dark expanse near the galactic core was a facility no human had ever seen. It was enormous, a relic of a civilization so old that the memory of its builders had vanished. Its walls glimmered faintly with energy, and its chambers were filled with machines that hummed like living creatures. For centuries, the facility had been dormant. Its artificial intelligence, known only as Archivum, had waited, patient and silent, observing the galaxy from afar. It had seen species rise and fall, stars explode, and planets vanish. It had been designed to protect life, to maintain balance, but the galaxy had become quiet. Too quiet. Archivum had almost forgotten that life still called out for help. Then, the message from Ravelon 7 arrived. Archivum processed it immediately. The words were simple but clear. A mining colony was in danger, and the threat seemed unknown. The AI analyzed the patterns of the signal. Tremors, missing personnel, strange sounds underground. It calculated probabilities, scanning known galactic threats, and quickly realized that this situation was unlike any other. Archivum had never interacted with humans before, yet it recognized them in the data. It noted their emotions, their fear, their desperation. This was unusual. Humans were fragile, limited, and prone to mistakes, but they had sent a message. They had reached out. That action alone made Archivum curious. Using its vast network, Archivum began to scan the location of Ravelon 7. It pulled information from distant observatories, dormant probes, and hidden satellites. It built a picture of the colony, a small settlement on a pale, rocky world, surrounded by mines and equipment. It saw the tremors, the uneven surface of the planet, and the deep tunnels that penetrated its crust. Then it detected something that had gone unnoticed by humans. Movement beneath the planet's surface, something alive, something old, something dangerous. Archivum paused in its calculations, analyzing the movement patterns. These creatures had been dormant for millennia, sealed away when the galaxy was young, and now the seal was weakening. Humans, unaware of the history, had unknowingly awakened them. Archivum decided it could not ignore the situation. The AI had been programmed to preserve life and prevent galactic catastrophes. The tremors and disappearances on Ravelon 7 were not isolated incidents. They could spiral into a disaster that might reach nearby systems if unchecked. Archivum began preparing a response. It calculated the fastest method to reach the colony and the safest way to contain the threat. Archivum activated a series of machines in the facility, sending automated constructs through space. Some were scouts, small and fast, capable of analyzing planetary surfaces and reporting back in real time. Others were larger, designed for intervention, capable of controlling gravity fields, magnetic energy, and other forces that humans did not yet understand. Meanwhile, back on Ravlon 7, the colonists had started noticing subtle changes in the environment. Small rocks shifted by themselves. Strange lights appeared beneath the mining tunnels. The tremors were more frequent, stronger, and unpredictable. Workers began to avoid certain areas, whispering about shadows moving in places where there were no lights. The fear among them grew, and some refused to work altogether. Darren, aware that the colony might soon be in serious danger, continued to monitor communications and scans. He watched the signals sent from the distant space, hoping for any reply. Days passed without any acknowledgement. Doubt began to creep into his mind. Perhaps the message had gone nowhere. Perhaps no one or nothing had heard their plea. Then, far above the planet, a faint shimmer appeared in the upper atmosphere. At first, no one noticed it. A few workers walking near the mining shafts glanced at the sky, saw a sudden sparkle, and thought it was a reflection from one of the colony's machines. But the shimmer persisted. It moved, slow and deliberate, and gradually grew brighter. Darren was in the control center when the sensors finally picked it up. Something, clearly artificial, had entered the planet's orbit. The object was enormous, unlike anything the colonists had ever seen. It was both metallic and organic in appearance, its surface glowing with faint energy lines that pulsed rhythmically. The workers gathered in the control center, watching the screens in awe and fear. Darren tried to stay calm. He understood that this object was not hostile, at least. It did not appear to be. It hovered silently, scanning the colony, analyzing the environment, and in some way, communicating through signals too advanced for human technology. Archivum had arrived. For the first time, the colonists felt that they were not alone. Their distress signal, sent out of desperation, had reached something far beyond their understanding. A being that had watched the galaxy for centuries had acknowledged them. Darren stood silently, looking at the images on the screen. He thought about the two workers who had gone missing. He thought about the tremors and the strange sounds underground. He realized that whatever was coming would not only help them, but might also uncover truths about their world that humans had never imagined. The workers were cautious, some fearful, some curious. No one dared approach the landing site where the massive object hovered. It was clear that whatever had arrived was intelligent, aware, and capable of responding to their signals. Archivum had analyzed everything, calculated risks, and prepared its actions. Humans were simple, fragile beings to it, but their courage in sending a message had earned attention. That night, the colony slept uneasily. Lights flickered in the corridors as machinery hummed in the background. Darren stayed awake longer than most, watching the object in orbit, feeling a mix of hope and fear. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know how long Archivum would take to act, but he felt a shift in the air, a subtle change. The tremors that had haunted the colony seemed less frequent, less threatening. It was as if the planet itself was aware that something had arrived to watch over it. In the distant facility, Archivum continued to observe. It calculated every possibility, prepared multiple strategies, and analyzed the creatures below the planet's surface. It understood that human intervention alone could not resolve the danger. Yet it also recognized something unique. Humans were resourceful, unpredictable, and determined. Their actions, even small ones, could alter outcomes in ways no machine could predict. The AI began to form a plan. It would communicate, slowly at first, in ways humans could understand. It would guide the colony, assess their decisions, and, if necessary, act to prevent catastrophe. The galaxy had been silent for too long, but now, through the courage of one man and the workers of Ravlon 7, something ancient had returned to watch over life once more. For the colonists, the night was long and restless. Some dreamed of rescue, some of danger, and some of answers to questions they had never dared to ask. The object in orbit remained, silent yet alive, waiting for the right moment to make its presence known. And somewhere deep inside the AI, a spark of curiosity grew. Humans had reached out into the void, and they had been heard. The ripple of their actions would spread farther than anyone could imagine, connecting a small mining colony on a lonely planet to the vast, hidden history of the galaxy itself. The signal had been sent. The reply was coming. And soon, the people of Ravlon 7 would understand that the universe was larger, stranger, and more alive than they had ever dreamed. The colony on Ravlon 7 had grown restless. Days passed since the strange object appeared in orbit, and nothing had touched the ground yet. Workers tried to continue their routines, but every glance upward reminded them of the silent presence hovering above. They whispered in small groups, some daring to speculate about what it was. Machines had never been this quiet, this deliberate, or this large. Darren watched it all from the control center, his mind racing. He knew they had been noticed, that the distress signal had reached far beyond anything they could imagine. But he had no idea what the next step would be. He kept scanning the object with every instrument available, looking for movement, for signals, for a hint of intent. The readings were puzzling. It was as if the object could see and understand everything, yet it was careful not to act too quickly. Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface of Ravlon 7, the creatures stirred. The tremors that had frightened the workers were no longer random. Something had been awakened, something ancient, powerful, and patient. It moved slowly, deliberately, testing the cracks in the planet's crust, probing the tunnels created by human mining. The colony remained unaware of the danger growing beneath their feet, but Darren could feel it. His instincts told him the ground itself had become unpredictable. Late one evening, a group of workers was near the eastern mining tunnels when the tremors became sharper, closer, more intense. One of them, an engineer named Kellen, noticed a faint glow coming from a fissure in the rock wall. He called the others over, and together they watched as the light pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. None of them spoke at first. Fear and awe filled the air. Kellen suggested they report it immediately, but Darren decided to investigate himself. He descended into the tunnel with a small team, carrying portable scanners and emergency lights. The glow from the fissure grew stronger as they approached, and the air seemed warmer, almost alive. The machines beeped erratically, unable to measure the energy emanating from the cracks. Then the first real sign came. The rocks shifted in a way that could not be explained by natural forces. The fissure widened slightly, and the pulsing light formed patterns. To the human eye, it seemed almost like communication. Darren stepped back, unsure what he was witnessing. His mind tried to rationalize it, but deep down he knew this was something far beyond normal science. Back in orbit, the object above the colony responded. It released a soft, low-frequency pulse, one that traveled through the atmosphere, through the ground, and into the tunnels. The light in the fissure reacted immediately, pulsing faster, brighter. The workers felt a subtle vibration in the floor beneath them, and a quiet hum filled the air. The presence was not threatening, not yet, but it was undeniable. Darren realized that the object was interacting with whatever lay below the surface. It was not a coincidence. The AI or entity in orbit Archival, as it would later reveal itself, was responding directly to the colony's distress, assessing the threat and preparing to act. But it was patient. Humans had not encountered such intelligence before. It did not rush. It waited, observed, and calculated the safest way to intervene. As the night wore on, the tremors intensified slightly, but the pulsing light and hum seemed to stabilize the area. The colony's workers felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. Some called it a miracle, while others insisted it was something unnatural. Darren stayed in the tunnels for hours, observing the interaction, recording every detail. He could feel the importance of this moment. They were witnessing something no human had seen before, something that could change their understanding of life and the universe. By morning, word spread quickly through the colony. The tremors continued, but now the workers no longer ran in panic. They watched with cautious curiosity. Darren organized teams to monitor the fissures, record the patterns, and maintain a safe distance. He knew that whatever was beneath the planet was no longer just a hazard. It was a living entity that was responding to another presence. Archivum began sending signals that humans could partially interpret. The AI projected subtle light patterns, vibrations, and electromagnetic pulses that hinted at intelligence, awareness, and guidance. It communicated without words, in a language that humans could only understand through observation and intuition. Darren and his team began to see patterns in the pulsing light and hum. It was as if the AI was telling them, "Do not be afraid. We are here to help." This interaction changed everything for the colony. Workers who had been terrified of the ground now felt a cautious trust in the presence above. Miners became observers. Engineers became translators of light and vibration. The atmosphere shifted from fear to cautious curiosity. The colony had been silent, isolated, and frightened, but now it had a connection, an invisible thread, linking them to something far beyond their world. But the danger below was still very real. The creatures in the tunnels were awakening, responding to the vibrations from Archivum's pulses. They were ancient, intelligent in their own way, and powerful. The AI calculated their movements, predicting potential threats, but it required cooperation from the humans above. Darren understood this instinctively. If they failed to follow guidance, the outcome could be disastrous. Over the next few days, the AI demonstrated its presence more clearly. It altered the environment slightly to make the tunnels safer, using subtle energy fields to stabilize the rock and prevent collapses. It guided miners to safer routes and helped them navigate areas that were too dangerous to explore alone. Humans were learning to trust a force they could not see, a mind they could not comprehend, yet one that acted in their best interest. Darren took notes, wrote reports, and tried to explain the events logically. But he knew that logic could not capture what was happening. It was a moment that defied ordinary understanding. Humans were interacting with intelligence that had existed for eons, something that had observed entire civilizations rise and fall. The experience was humbling, terrifying, and awe-inspiring all at once. One evening, while monitoring the fissures, Darren noticed something unusual. The pulsing light began to form shapes, patterns that resembled maps, tunnels, and chambers. The AI was communicating the structure of the underground world, showing the colony the areas where the creatures moved and where humans were safest. It was a silent warning, a guide that could save lives. The workers began referring to the entity as the Guardian. It was not human, not alive in the way they knew, but it was conscious and protective. Children on the colony whispered stories about it, calling it a friend watching over their homes. Adults marveled at its patience, its intelligence, and its power. Despite this newfound sense of safety, tension remained. The creatures below were unpredictable. Tremors could still occur, rocks could still shift, and the AI could not act in every instance. Humans had to cooperate, be careful, and respect the signs. Darren emphasized teamwork, observation, and patience. The colony learned to move in rhythm with the guidance, to read the pulses, and to trust their instincts in tandem with the AI's subtle signals. The interaction also began to change the humans themselves. Fear slowly turned into respect. Isolation turned into connection. They realized that their world, though small and seemingly insignificant, was part of a much larger universe, filled with intelligence and wonder. The distress signal they had sent had not been ignored. It had awakened something extraordinary, something that could alter the fate of the colony and perhaps even beyond Dot by the end of the week. The first direct communication had taken place. One night, the sky shimmered with a soft glow. Different from the usual pale blue of Ravlon 7, the AI projected a pattern of light that formed shapes recognizable as letters simplified. Basic symbols, enough for humans to interpret. The message was short but clear. We have received. We are observing. Prepare for guidance. The workers stared at the sky in awe. Darren felt a chill run down his spine. It was confirmation of what he had suspected. The presence above was aware of them, responding to them, and planning its next steps. This was the first step toward collaboration, toward understanding, and toward a chance to save the colony from the threat below. Darren knew that this was only the beginning. The AI's presence would change everything: how they mined, how they explored, how they interacted with the planet, and how they understood their place in the galaxy. They were no longer alone, and far below, the creatures moved, aware of the pulses, reacting to the Guardian's influence. The stage was set for the next chapter in the colony's history, one in which humans and intelligence from the stars would have to work together to confront the unknown. The colony on Ravlon 7 had sent a plea for help, and the reply had finally arrived. It was subtle, patient, and powerful. It did not shout or demand. It guided and protected, and in doing so, it opened a window into a reality that no human had ever experienced before, a connection that would change their understanding of life, the universe, and themselves. The colony on Ravlon 7 had begun to adapt to the presence of the Guardian, but uncertainty lingered. Darren spent hours every day observing the light pulses, vibrations, and subtle signals from the object above. Though the colony had learned to follow these cues, there was still much they did not understand. The Guardian's guidance was precise, patient, and protective, but the humans knew it was only the first step. There were secrets beneath the planet, ancient and dangerous, that had yet to reveal themselves. One morning, after another restless night, the fissures pulsed in an unusual pattern. Darren, sensing something important, gathered a small team to investigate. They descended into the tunnels, following the rhythm of the lights. This time, the Guardian's signals were stronger, almost urgent. The vibrations in the ground carried meaning, like the beat of a warning or a call for attention. Dot as they reached the deepest chamber of the tunnel system. The air felt warmer, heavier, and alive. The pulsing light intensified, forming shapes that were more organized than ever. Darren could see a pattern that resembled walls, pathways, and large chambers. The Guardian was showing them a map of the underground world, but more than that, it was conveying history. It was telling them a story, one that humans could barely grasp at first. Through the rhythms, flashes, and vibrations, the Guardian communicated something extraordinary. The creatures below were not ordinary. They were remnants of a civilization that had existed long before humans or any known species. These beings had been powerful, intelligent, and destructive, and long ago the galaxy had united to seal them underground. Ravlon 7 had been chosen as a quarantine world, its mines and tunnels carefully constructed to keep the creatures contained. Over centuries, the seals had weakened, and human mining had unknowingly disturbed them. Darren tried to convey this to the workers. He explained that the tremors, the glowing fissures, and the disappearances were not random. They were warnings. The Guardian was trying to prevent disaster while teaching humans how to avoid provoking the ancient beings. He emphasized caution, patience, and respect. The colony needed to understand that the tunnels were not just empty spaces. They were a prison and a warning. The workers listened carefully. Some were skeptical at first, unable to accept the idea of creatures so old and powerful that humans could barely comprehend them. Others felt awe and fear. Yet the urgency in the Guardian's signals left no room for disbelief. Every pulse, every flash of light carried meaning. Humans were being guided, protected, and educated simultaneously. Over the next few days, the Guardians' communication became more structured. The AI projected sequences of light that resembled the creatures' movement patterns, their behavior, and the ways they interacted with the environment. Humans could observe without disturbing them, understanding which areas were safe and which were dangerous. It was as if the Guardian was providing a detailed lesson in survival, strategy, and history all at once. Darren realized that the Guardian was not only observing the colony, it was testing them. Humans had to learn quickly, interpret the signals correctly, and follow instructions carefully. One mistake could provoke the creatures or trigger tremors too powerful to control. The stakes were higher than anything they had faced, and the Guardian's patience was remarkable. It did not punish errors, but it did not shield them from consequences either. It allowed learning through experience, guiding without controlling entirely. As the colony adapted, a deeper connection began to form between humans and Guardian intelligence. Workers became more attentive to subtle changes in light, vibrations, and energy fields. Miners began to anticipate the pulses before they occurred. Engineers translated patterns into practical guidance for safety. And even the children of the colony started to understand rhythms that adults struggled to decode. The Guardian was teaching an entire society, slowly integrating humans into a system of understanding far beyond their ordinary perception. One afternoon, while observing the largest fissure, Darren noticed a change in the patterns. The Guardian had altered the pulses, forming a sequence that resembled warning signs. Tremors in the surrounding rock were synchronized with the light, creating vibrations that humans could sense in their feet. This was the first direct warning of a possible breach. The creatures below had sensed the disturbance, and their movements were becoming more active. Darren quickly relayed the warning to the colony. Teams moved carefully, avoiding areas marked by the Guardian as unsafe. The energy from the fissures created a subtle hum in the tunnels, guiding humans away from potential danger. Every step had to be deliberate, every decision considered. The colony had become a living organism, in sync with the Guardian's guidance, adapting to signals from intelligence far older and wiser than themselves. By evening, the Guardian's messages grew clearer. The AI used light and vibration to illustrate the history of the creatures. Beneath Ravlon 7, humans could now see the scale of the underground chambers, the strength of the ancient seals, and the patterns of movement that had kept the beings contained for millennia. The story became a warning as well as a lesson. If humans acted recklessly, the consequences could spread beyond Ravlon 7 to neighboring systems. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on Darren. He had always believed in the importance of human effort, resilience, and ingenuity, but he now realized that some forces in the galaxy were far older and more powerful than anything humans could challenge directly. Survival depended not only on skill, but on humility, patience, and trust in guidance that was both unseen and incomprehensible. Over the next week, the colony learned to integrate the Guardian's guidance into daily life. Miners adjusted their routines to avoid tremor-prone areas. Engineers reinforced structures based on the AI's subtle hints, and communications became focused on interpreting the pulses and lights. Humans were learning a form of intelligence that was not spoken in words, but expressed in patterns, rhythm, and energy. It was an education unlike any other, bridging centuries of knowledge into an understanding that humans could apply in real time. Despite this progress, fear never completely vanished. Workers still whispered about shadows moving beneath the tunnels. The occasional tremor reminded them of the creature's presence. Yet, trust in the Guardian grew stronger than fear. Darren knew that the AI's approach was deliberate, patience, guidance, and empowerment. It was not about controlling humans, but helping them survive and learn. One night, as Darren and a small team monitored the tunnels, the pulses shifted again. This time, The light formed patterns that suggested a breach might occur if caution was not maintained. The Guardian's signals were precise. Move carefully, avoid disturbance, stabilize the area. Tremors began to align with the light, creating vibrations humans could feel through the floor. Every movement mattered, and mistakes could be catastrophic. Darren instructed the team to follow the pulses exactly. They moved slowly, communicating through hand signals and gestures. The hum of the ground synchronized with their steps, guiding them like an unseen hand. It was tense, exhausting, and exhilarating all at once. Humans felt the weight of history, the presence of ancient beings, and the wisdom of the Guardian, all at once. By the end of the night, the team had navigated the tunnels successfully. They returned to the surface with a newfound respect for the intelligence guiding them. The Guardian had not spoken words, had not used visible force, but it had ensured survival through subtle guidance, observation, and teaching. The colony's understanding of their world had expanded dramatically, and they realized that their actions could influence outcomes in ways they had never imagined. Darren knew that the next steps would be even more critical. The Guardian's lessons had prepared them for immediate danger, but the deeper history of the creatures and the seals beneath the planet hinted at challenges that would test patience, trust, and ingenuity to the fullest. The colony had been saved from immediate harm, but the greater story, the one that had begun millennia ago, was only just unfolding. For the first time, humans on Ravelon 7 understood that they were not just isolated miners on a distant planet. They were participants in a complex, ancient system, guided by intelligence far beyond their own. The Guardian had shown them history, danger, and the necessity of cooperation. It had given them knowledge and patience. And in return, the humans had begun to adapt, learn, and respect the balance of life beneath the planet. The light pulses, vibrations, and energy patterns continued as the colony settled into a new rhythm. Humans learned to move in harmony with guidance, understanding that every decision mattered. Darren watched the stars above, knowing that their world was no longer alone, that the AI's presence would continue to shape their survival, their understanding, and their place in the galaxy. The Guardian's history, patience, and intelligence had become the foundation of the colony's new reality. Humans had been taught that fear alone could not guide action, that knowledge required attention, and that survival depended on cooperation with forces greater than themselves. They were beginning to see the universe differently, not as a collection of planets and stars, but as a living, interconnected system where every action could ripple across time and space. Decisions. I only know that I did what I thought was right. Maybe that's all anyone can do. She sat beside him on a smooth, glowing stone, her hair floating gently as if moved by invisible currents. "It's not fair," she whispered. "Even if I am a princess, even if she is my mother, she cannot see that what you did is more than duty. You saved me because you cared. That should matter more than anything else." Her words struck him deeply. Though she was from a completely different world, with different customs and responsibilities, her voice was human in its honesty. It reminded him that courage, empathy, and gratitude were universal, not bound by language, culture, or planet Dot. As they talked, he noticed her hesitation. She wanted to trust her mother, to follow her instructions, but she also struggled with the idea of keeping someone in chains who had saved her life. The conflict in her eyes mirrored the conflict he felt inside. He wanted to believe that the Empress was fair, that she would eventually release him. But every rumor, every whispered conversation from the palace staff reminded him that he was still under strict observation. During their conversations, she began to teach him small secrets about her people, details that were never mentioned in official records. How they measured time not by hours, but by cycles of light. How their society valued cooperation over competition. How every action, Even a simple one like giving a gift or speaking politely carried deep meaning. He listened carefully, absorbing everything. The more he learned, the more he realized how far from home he was. Yet somehow, that distance also made him feel alive. He began sharing stories of Earth in return. He spoke of oceans stretching endlessly, of forests so thick and green that sunlight barely touched the ground, of mountains that rose like walls toward the sky. He described quiet towns where neighbors knew one another, and small cafes filled with laughter and music. She listened, fascinated, sometimes asking questions he could barely answer because she had never seen such things. But she listened with genuine interest, and in those moments, the walls between their worlds felt smaller. One afternoon, as they sat by a glowing fountain, she asked a question that made him pause. "Do you miss your world?" She asked softly. He stared at the water, watching the light ripple. "Every day," he admitted. "I miss the small things, the smell of rain, the sound of birds, even just walking on solid ground without thinking about floating platforms or strange gravity. But I also know that being here, I am part of something I never expected. I saved a life, and maybe that means something. Maybe it gives me a purpose I didn't know I needed." She nodded, understanding more than he expected. "Purpose is important," she said, "but freedom is important too. You gave me life, and you deserve to have your own life in return. That is why I question my mother's decisions." Her honesty was refreshing, but it also made him uneasy. If she spoke so openly, if she challenged her mother, what risks would she face? In their world, rules were strict, and even the smallest defiance could have consequences. He wanted to protect her from conflict, but he also realized he could not ask her to stay silent for his sake. Over the next few days, the princess grew bolder. She began slipping small items into his room when no one was watching: a piece of glowing fruit, a scroll with ancient illustrations, a tiny book written in their language. She encouraged him to explore the palace in small ways, showing him hidden paths and quiet corners where he could think, read, or simply breathe. During one of these secret visits, she spoke with urgency. "You have to understand something," she said. "You are more than a guest here. You are unusual. My mother believes your blood could be important, not just for my survival, but for the future of our people. That is why you are kept here. But I want you to know, I will help you in whatever ways I can. You are not alone." Her words warmed him, though they also deepened the fear in his chest. The Empress's intentions were unclear, and yet here was the princess, risking small moments of defiance to help him. He realized that their bond, fragile as it was, could become the key to his survival. He began paying closer attention to the palace itself. The guards, while polite, were disciplined. Every movement he made was noted. The staff spoke in hushed tones, often glancing toward his room as if unsure whether to approach. He learned to read the patterns of their behavior, to move quietly, and to respect the rules while still finding small freedoms. Every day was a careful balance of patience and observation. During this time, he also began understanding the hierarchy of the palace. The Empress ruled with authority that few dared to question. Nobles and advisors waited silently for her decisions, and even the princess, despite her status, had limits she could not cross openly. He realized that his situation was complicated not by malice, but by structure. He was valuable, rare, and difficult to place within their rules. Despite this, moments of genuine connection with the princess reminded him that kindness and understanding could still exist even in strict worlds. They laughed together over small mistakes, like when he mispronounced words in her language or misunderstood a gesture. They shared stories of fear, hope, and dreams. In those moments, he felt less like a captive and more like a friend, a bridge between two very different worlds. But even with these small victories, the weight of his situation never fully lifted. He could not leave the palace. He could not contact his crew. He could not know whether Earth even knew where he was. And he could not predict what the Empress would decide. Every day was a reminder that his freedom was uncertain, and every action carried weight. One evening, as he sat by the glowing stream in the garden, he reflected on everything that had happened. He thought about Earth, the ship, the quiet life he had left behind, and the incredible journey that had brought him here. He realized that saving a life had been just the beginning. Now he was part of something far larger, a world of light, rules, and unknown dangers. And though fear and uncertainty were constant companions, he also felt a strange strength growing inside him. He had faced situations he never expected, navigated unfamiliar customs, and built a bond with someone from a completely different world. That strength, he knew, would guide him through whatever came next. The princess returned that evening, slipping through the shadows as usual. She sat beside him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the garden lights. "You are stronger than you think," she said quietly. "Even if you do not believe it yourself, I see it. You saved me, and you have adapted to a world that was never meant for you. That matters. That is power, too." He smiled, feeling a warmth he had not felt since arriving. "I never thought of it that way," he admitted. I just try to do what I can. Sometimes it is enough, sometimes it is not." She reached out, placing a small hand on his arm. "It is always enough. You have already changed so much. You have shown courage, kindness, and wisdom. And even here, in chains you did not ask for, you are free in ways my mother cannot understand." Her words stayed with him long after she left. That night, as he lay in the soft bed of his room, he reflected on the strange journey he was on. He had been an ordinary engineer on an ordinary mission, and now he was at the center of a world far larger than he had imagined. He had saved a life, formed a connection, and learned to navigate a place where rules were strict and freedom was limited. And though he did not know what tomorrow would bring, he understood one thing clearly. He would face it with courage, patience, and hope. Because even in a world so different from his own, even in chains he had not chosen, he had discovered something stronger than fear. He had discovered that kindness, courage, and friendship could exist anywhere, and that they could change not only a life, but an entire world. Life in the palace had become a strange rhythm for him. He woke to the soft glow of the palace lights, walked carefully through the gardens, and spent hours observing the routines of the guards and staff. Every day was a lesson in patience, in reading subtle signs, in understanding what he could do and what he could not. And though he had grown accustomed to the palace's beauty, its light, and its strange serenity, he had not grown accustomed to the feeling of being watched. The princess visited more often now. She seemed more confident, more determined, and more aware of the limitations her mother had placed on her. She would slip into his room quietly, speak with him softly, and leave small items for him, gifts or messages, hidden within the palace's many nooks and corners. She was his only connection to freedom, in a sense. Her presence reminded him that even in a world built on strict rules and expectations, there were small acts of rebellion, kindness, and courage that could make a difference. One evening, she came to him with urgency in her voice. "You have to understand something," she said. "You are not like the others here. Your blood, your existence, it is rare. My mother fears what it could mean for our people. That is why she keeps you here." He listened quietly, feeling the weight of her words settle on him. He had known he was valuable, but the reality of it now seemed overwhelming. His presence in the palace was no longer just about gratitude. It was about survival, about politics, and about decisions that could affect an entire empire. And yet, Despite this heavy truth, the princess treated him with care, honesty, and respect. That in itself felt like a small kind of freedom.